This shocking story took place in 1999 in Columbia, Ohio, USA. News headlines sent shockwaves across the community when a newborn boy was found in a sports bag at a water-filled quarry. For years, the identity of the child and the criminal remained a mystery, and the baby was simply named Hope. A memorial service was even organized by the local Nara community. The police worked tirelessly for more than 6 years trying to solve the case, suspecting they were hunting a monster in human form. But when the truth was finally uncovered, it shocked everyone. At the time of the crime, Jessica Coleman was a new high school student. She met Tom Tron, a popular guy who was already a star on the local basketball team. Jessica, a cheerleader, was flattered when Tom asked her out on a date. Despite a small age difference, they hit it off and soon became a couple. Jessica was smart, beautiful, and popular. She was also athletic and a good student. As their relationship grew, Jessica became pregnant at the age of 15, something she never expected. At first, she dismissed the signs, assuming it was due to her intense sports routine, but when her period didn't arrive, she realized the truth. The pregnancy test confirmed her worst fear. The teenage girl was terrified. She feared her parents would hate her, and the thought of becoming a laughingstock at school consumed her. So she kept the pregnancy a secret, even from her family, and only told Tom. They agreed to keep the situation under wraps and hoped the problem would somehow go away. Jessica started developing unhealthy habits, including eating disorders like anorexia and bulimia, to hide her growing belly. She maintained her usual routines, playing sports, cheering, and attending school, all while trying to avoid gaining weight. Despite her efforts to keep everything normal, the pregnancy was taking a toll on her. In February 1999, Jessica went into labor during class. She felt terrible and asked to go home, but didn't tell her mother the real reason. She simply said she wasn't feeling well. Jessica's mother, a nurse, took her home and gave her painkillers. The contractions became stronger as the day went on, and eventually, Jessica went to the bathroom where she unexpectedly delivered the baby into the toilet. She was in shock. The baby wasn't moving or making any noise, and Jessica was overwhelmed. She picked the baby up and tried to clean his mouth and cut the umbilical cord. In her disoriented state, she thought the baby might be dead. After trying to clean herself up, Jessica decided to hide the baby in her closet. Later that evening, she went downstairs to dinner with her family, but she couldn't stop thinking about what had happened. She went back to her room, checked on the baby, and was still unsure whether he was alive. Feeling desperate and confused, Jessica feared that the baby was suffering. In a moment of panic, she stabbed him in the chest, believing she was ending his suffering. The next morning, she put the newborn in a sports bag and hid it in the closet. She didn't attend school that day and instead left town with her family. She confided in her boyfriend Tom about what had happened, and he agreed to help her. The following evening, he came over, took the bag, and disposed of it by throwing it into the quarry near their house. Afterward, Jessica and Tom felt guilty, but they didn't know how to undo what they had done. They remained silent, hoping the truth would never come out. But 6 months later, the baby's body was discovered, and the investigation began. In March 2006, Lorain County Sheriff's Office received an alarming statement from a diver named Carl Lauren. He had recently built his house near a shallow part of a local reservoir. On March 3, 2006, while diving, Carl noticed something unusual in the water. When he retrieved the object, it turned out to be a sports bag. Upon unzipping it, a child's leg emerged, showing signs of severe decomposition. Inside the bag, there were also several stones, likely used to weigh it down and prevent it from floating to the surface. The police were immediately called and the body was sent for an autopsy. The child weighed 4.5 kilograms and was wrapped in a towel. The forensic expert revealed that the baby had a skull fracture and a stab wound to the chest. A woman's hairpin was found attached to the baby's umbilical cord, though the cause of death could not be conclusively determined due to the advanced state of decomposition. A search was launched, and divers explored the quarry for evidence, but it proved unsuccessful. The local community was shocked by the discovery. They couldn't fathom that someone could commit such a cruel act against an innocent newborn. Protests and rallies were held, demanding justice, while the police intensified their efforts to find the criminal. Everyone assumed the killer was a psychopath capable of extreme cruelty, but what followed was a shocking twist. Jessica Coleman's mother, who was unaware of her daughter's pregnancy, saw the news about the baby's discovery on TV. She was horrified and outraged by the cruelty of the crime. Little did she know, the killers were sitting right in front of her. At that moment, Jessica felt the weight of reality hit her. She panicked, realizing that the baby might now be identified and the truth could come to light. For years, Jessica lived in fear of being caught, but she was even more terrified of losing her boyfriend, Tom. So, despite her guilt and remorse, she remained silent. Jessica considered confessing to her mother, hoping for understanding and support, but despite the torment and psychological pressure, she couldn't find the strength to do so. When her mother spoke to her about the murdered baby found in the quarry, Jessica denied any involvement. Her mother believed her and never suspected that her own daughter had committed such a monstrous act. In the meantime, the local community held a memorial service for the baby, who had become known as Hope. The young mother continued to watch the news reports, unaware that these stories were about her own child. For 6 long years the police had no new leads. The evidence, the hairpin and sports bag, remained unidentified, and the water had washed away any potential DNA. Despite extensive efforts, the case went cold. During this time, Jessica and Tom moved on with their lives. Tom became a teacher, graduated from college, and eventually distanced himself from Jessica. Jessica, meanwhile, graduated high school and went to college, but her guilt never left her. She struggled with depression and used alcohol and drugs to cope with the constant torment. Jessica eventually entered a serious relationship with Matt McKenzie, a local hairdresser, and the two even talked about marriage. But Jessica's past haunted her, and one night, during a breakdown, she confided in Matt about the events of 6 years ago. She wanted to share her burden with someone who could understand, but Matt dismissed it as drunken delusion. However, someone overheard Jessica's confession at the bar and anonymously tipped off the police. Detectives soon arrived to question Jessica. At first, she was in shock and didn't expect them to come, but she obediently went to the station. There, investigators were shocked by the sight of the young, attractive, well-groomed woman, someone they would never have expected to be involved in such a gruesome crime. As the interrogation began, it quickly became clear that Jessica was the one responsible. Despite her reluctance, she eventually broke down and confessed. She explained that she had not realized the baby was alive at birth and believed it had been stillborn. She asked not to be viewed as a monster and admitted that Tom had helped her dispose of the body. Jessica's confession revealed a defensive reaction to the trauma she had suffered. According to her at the time, she was a 15-year-old girl unprepared for the responsibility of adulthood. Her mother, Jennifer, was devastated, feeling guilty for not noticing her daughter's pregnancy and not preventing the tragedy. Jessica's guilt weighed heavily on her, and she blamed herself for not being able to build a trusting relationship with her mother. Despite Jessica's age at the time of the crime, she was tried as an adult due to the severity of the offense. In exchange for her cooperation with the prosecution, she avoided a jury trial and pleaded guilty to 7 felonies, including abuse of a corpse, manslaughter, and obstruction of justice. On February 8, 2006, a judge sentenced Jessica, then 20 years old, to 6 years in prison. The judge acknowledged the complexity of the case and the fact that Jessica had cooperated, though the crime was heinous. The cause of the baby's death could not be conclusively determined due to the body's condition, but the forensic expert believed that Jessica might have accidentally caused the baby's death during the birth, either through a fall or other trauma. It was also unclear whether the stab wound or the skull fracture was the cause of death. Tom was also arrested and made a deal with the prosecution. He admitted to discarding the baby's body in the quarry and was sentenced to 2 years in prison, though he served only 13 months before being released early. He later expressed regret, admitting that he made a terrible mistake, but he was also just a young man at the time. Tom, unlike Jessica, seemed to experience his own form of pain and remorse for the events of the past. Though he had committed a grave mistake, he was a respected and well-regarded member of society, which the court took into consideration. Tom was never involved in any further criminal activities. He was a calm, well-mannered individual, an athlete and a teacher who had no history of aggression. However, the revelation of his involvement in the child's death led to him being stripped of his teaching license. After the incident, Tom reinvented himself. He became the vice president of a roofing company, married, and started a family, living with his wife and children in Strongsville. His probation ended without incident in 2009. By this time, Tom had fully compensated for the damages caused by his actions, though Jessica at this point still owed $4,000 in court fees. Interestingly, at the time of the court verdict in the case involving the baby, Jessica was already on probation for previous issues related to alcohol and recreational substances. This probation stemmed from an incident in which she had traveled to Florida without informing law enforcement, violating the terms of her probation. She had also been arrested for drunk driving in the past, which further compounded her legal troubles. The judge overseeing her case had even insisted that his own family attend the sentencing, hoping it would serve as a valuable life lesson for them about the importance of taking responsibility for one's actions. This case sparked a significant public outcry. Journalists who had covered the discovery of the child's body later began interviewing Jessica's family and boyfriend. Jessica's father believed that the safe haven law, which was already in effect in many states at the time, might have prevented the tragedy. Under these laws, a mother could leave an unwanted newborn at a hospital, fire department, or police station without facing criminal charges. This law was designed to offer an alternative to abandoning a child in unsafe places. Following the case, a public campaign was launched, driven by journalists who advocated for the expansion and formalization of safe haven laws. After months of lobbying and public pressure, the governor signed a new regulation, which made safe haven laws available in all 50 states. These laws allowed newborns to be left at designated locations, such as special boxes or safe havens, without the mother facing legal repercussions. Since the implementation of these laws, at least 13 newborns have been saved, including one baby girl who was adopted by a journalist involved in advocating for the reform. Years later, Jessica admitted that she had never heard of these safe haven laws during her pregnancy. She didn't know that there were safe options available to her, such as giving her child up for adoption without risking exposure or punishment. Looking back, Jessica deeply regrets her actions and wishes she had known about these options. She often reflects on what could have been, calling her child Stephen and lamenting, "I could have played in the park with my son, but I don't. I never thought my life would turn out like this. I made a terrible, terrible mistake." In 2011, Jessica was released from probation early, and her rehabilitation was considered when reviewing her case. Despite her past actions, the court took into account her transformation during her time in prison. Jessica had fully acknowledged her mistakes and sincerely repented for what she had done. While incarcerated, she dedicated herself to meaningful social work, helping others in prison and striving to make amends. She became an advocate for family communication, using her own experience to encourage others to avoid making the same mistakes. Jessica had a supportive figure in prison, a fellow inmate who had faced a similar situation, one that also led to tragic consequences. Although she had every chance to prevent it, the tragedy had still occurred. Jessica's case, sadly, was not an isolated one. The changes in legislation, although helpful, were not enough to prevent other mothers from making similar choices, and the tragedy of newborn deaths continued to haunt many families. Thank you for watching.